Here he is, the man himself, ladies and gentlemen, the living legend that is Michael Parkinson. That's a great theme. That's the best theme. Thank you, sir. Sit yourself down. Wow. What a...
Can I just say, that was a fascinating interview. It was really fascinating. I was riveted by it. Wonderful. We share this common passion for movies. It's nice to be reminded of those stars and
what
the
a
quality.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. What's going on there? You're barking up the wrong tree there, love. When you think about, you know... Well, we'll talk about movies in a minute, maybe, but let's talk about you, because you're here. I had the pleasure of meeting you before for Sport Relief, and I know afterwards you said that couch was spectacularly uncomfortable.
It is, still is.
Is it really? We should...
Not improved at all.
Well, we haven't done
it's like sitting on cobble. It's awful.
Well, your chair, of course, was really comfortable on the show, and you bought your chair, the Parky chair, didn't you?
I did. When I did my last show, I went in the studio and they stripped it bare of everything, you know, all the photographs and all the chairs backstage, like you have, they're all gone. I said, I like working in this kind of isolation ward, something that's been knocked down, reduced. And I really got the ump about that. And I walked on and sat in the chair, and I thought, they'll take this as well unless I nick it. They won't let me nick it. I bought it for £2,000, so...
£2,000?
£2,000, yeah.
I saw you
and
coming.
Then they did see me coming up. And then I bought the other chair as well, which we call the David Beckham chair, because Beckham's bum's been on it, you know. Yeah. And many other bums too. But I think one day I'll stick them on eBay and do it for charity or something.
But that must be a strange feeling, I would have thought, when you know you're leaving that studio and leaving that theme for possibly the last time. Certainly, you've said I'm not doing it anymore. I mean, it must be a strange feeling.
It was very, very sad. I mean, it was sad. It'd been my life for, what, 30 years or more, the talk show, and I missed it. I knew I would miss it, but it was time to go. You know, there's too much competition nowadays.
No. I don't think that was the reason, was it? I mean, it wasn't really... There were other shows. I think
it was a mixture of things. I'd actually grown, if I'm frank, a little bit tired of doing it, basically. And also, too, you know, television had changed. The people who run television have changed, too. And having been in the business for about 50 years, you inevitably will come to the conclusion that things that aren't like they used to be. It's no good arguing with that at all. That's the way it is. So if you don't approve of some of it, then you might as well get out and get away, because you don't want to become that old boy in the corner slagging everybody off. I mean, that's stupid.
I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it struck me at the time when I was watching just from the sidelines over here. And I loved it when you were here, because it was much more fun being number 2 than it is being, as you know, I'm kind of referred to as number 1 here now, and obviously that's a joke, but I mean, it was much easier to be number 2 because I had someone to mock on a regular basis, and you took all the flack for me, and then you went over to ITV. But I didn't think, I didn't think you got the fair deal over that. I don't think they treated you with the respect you deserved, or they made the most of you, frankly.
Well, I had a bigger gripe with BBC, if you want to know, frankly. I mean, I left the BBC because they put in my place a show, Match of the Day, which I've been beating regularly when it was on ITV. It seemed a bit daft. Yeah. And also, too, I got the sense as well that there was a kind of feeling that you know, somehow I was too old. It's interesting. I was writing this book, or after I'd written it, a guy came up to me and said, you know, about that time you were at the BBC and you're having an argument with him. He said, I was told, he said, by a very senior man at the BBC that they should get rid of you because you're senile. Now, I'm trying to get his name from this person. He won't tell me who it was.
And you didn't have a pen in your pyjamas, of course, did you? He was outside at lunchtime, he was looking for matron.
Terrible thing. I mean, you'll come to this as well when you get older. That thing about people are making a judgment about you because you're old and grey, you know.
But I didn't think over there, I don't think they made the most of you either. You know, they started bumping it late at the show and they
Well, when we got to ITV, actually, the people who hired us left, and there was a kind of a counter-revolution. And the person who took over didn't want the show. It was as simple as that. Yeah. In fact, I met the guy who eventually got rid of the show when I first joined, and my meeting with him was such that when I got back to the office, I said, if that guy ever takes over ITV, start the car. And he did, and we started the car.
Yeah, well...
I mean, I'm not grumbling at all. Listen, I mean, I had a wonderful, wonderful time, and I left without any regret at all, and certainly no sense of remorse or anything like that.
Let's go back. Before we talk about your successful TV career and what a career it was, let's talk about one of the things I love about your book, and I've read your book cover to cover, OK, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed it because it spans such a brilliant, well, so many changes in British life, in society, in media, and your career was remarkable as well. The early days, of course, you went about, and I got such a strong feeling, not just about your parents in this book, but also your grandfather comes out as quite a character. The black-backed miner,
Oh,
is
the
that right?
black Sammy Parkinson, he was that, yeah. I mean, in those days, before people had baths, some miners would not have their backs washed. They'd sit in front of the fire in a tub, and they'd wash everything part of their body, but not their backs. They had this suspicion that if they did, it would weaken their back, and any fall that might happen in the pit would actually therefore be more severe. It was strange. It was like a carapace, a black carapace on their back. Very, very odd. They'd wash it occasionally, of course they would. They had to. But I remember it was a vivid thing that in the village before there was a pithead baths came in. He was a real old character, he was. They didn't have a tooth in his head. In fact, I worked out that all my family were very close, about 20 aunts and grandparents and all that, had about 6 teeth between them, actually. and of course, in those days, I mean, we forget, you know, I'd forgotten until I started writing the book, that, you know, in those days, because people were so poor and the general situation was grim, they'd actually get rid of their teeth.
Yeah.
I mean, because they couldn't afford to keep them. Yeah. That was the thing about it. So the sooner you got a toothache, you had them all out.
A nice set of new gnashers.
New gnashers.
Yeah.
My dad got him his new gnashers and the big flared trousers. He was irresistible.
Let me talk about your early days in TV. Were you seen as a natural... how did you make that leap to television?
A guy rang me up one day. I mean, I'd left the Daily Express and I was unhappy there and thinking about moving on and having a local paper in Yorkshire or something. And a guy rang me who I'd met at a conference and said, listen, I'm now producing for Granada Television, the newly formed Granada Television. Would you like a job as a producer? And I said, I don't know anything about television. He said, nor do I. And I thought, that'd be wonderful. And the great thing, that was the very beginnings of Granada Television. I mean, I arrived, about 2 years after Coronation Street. And it was also the start of that wonderful time in British society when the 60s happened. And we were the epicenter of all that, you know. And the show that I did, which is an evening magazine show with a pop act on every night, reflecting the music of the time. I mean, more or less, the Beatles were our resident group. I mean, they didn't know they were the Beatles, and we didn't know until Lennon said one day to us, he said, we're going to London to make a record. And when they came back, I mean, 50,000 kids chased them through Manchester, and the world flipped onto its head. Yeah. And it changed, everything changed. Yeah. And I, who could not have got a job at the BBC as a commissionaire because of my accent in those days, it became the thing to have my kind of accent, to get a job.
What we call a regional accent.
And people forget just what a huge shift it was, you know, in those days. It was a very exciting time. And then, of course, into Manchester at the same time, that's all we needed, arrived George Best. Yeah. Plonk, straight in the middle of it, and that completed the set.
The fifth Beatle arrived.
Fifth Beatle, exactly.
There's a group, I know obviously you spoke to the Beatles and individually and I believe together many times, but there's a clip we have here of you interviewing Mick Jagger.
Oh, God.
When the Rolling Stones, from 1965, and Mick Jagger seems like a totally different person.
Well, he's got a terribly posh voice. He talks like that, doesn't he?
This must be one of his first TV interviews.
The very first. It was the very first time they've been on television.
So this is the first time Mick Jagger was interviewed for TV by a young Michael Parkinson. Look at this.
What about these girls in, I think it was in Manchester the other night, where a couple of girls threw themselves from the balcony onto the floor?
Well, I don't understand that. That's beyond me completely. You know? I couldn't start on that.
What's how do you sort of, you've been doing this now for how many years is it?
2 years.
2 years. How much longer do you give yourself doing this thing, going around being a sort of
I don't know. I never thought I'd be doing it for 2 years even, you know. When we started off, I never thought we'd make it very big anyway. And then when we're making records for 2 years and everybody still goes around calling us quite a new group, you know, sort of. And I don't know, honestly. I think we're sort of pretty well set up for at least another year.
He was right. Did you feel comfortable immediately in front of the camera?
No. And I was taught a very big lesson by Bill Grundy when the first time I did my very first live performance, doing the show with Bill. And Bill said to me beforehand, he said, just look at the lens, imagine it's Mary, lean into it, talk confidently, deep breath, slow down, he said. And he said, if you get in the Maya, look at me live. And we got to the end of the show without me collapsing, and I got through it, and I got up to race out the studio to head for the bar to toast my success. And Bill Grundy said to me, stop right there. I said, why? He said, you've forgotten something. I said, what's that? He said, thank the studio. And the biggest lesson that any young performer learns is that get them on your side, because you're on the tip of the iceberg. Once they work for you, you're okay. If they don't, you're knackered.
Well, I'll give you like biscuits at Christmas. I figure that covers it. But I don't let them speak.
Very interesting lesson.
Your favourite guest, the best people you spoke to, the conversations you most remember, and I guess they might not necessarily be the biggest names, but which are the ones that you look back with either pride or just joy?
Orson Welles, because I like you, I shared that love of Kane, and he influenced me greatly as a young man, a young cinema goer. But to interview him was not just because he was a colossus, but because he's an exceedingly interesting and fascinating man who could speak for an hour without using a cliche at all. And one of my other favourites was a wonderful woman called Catherine Bramwell Booth, who was a 96-year-old major in the Salvation Army and who was utterly, utterly brilliant and made me actually not afraid of old age.
You know, that's one of the things I miss about, and there isn't a show like yours on TV now. My show's never aspired to be that kind of show, and I don't think I could do it either. But there's not a show which actually kind of is unashamedly about the guest. It's conversation. This is an entertainment show with a different purpose. Most of them are nowadays. But there isn't one that did it in the way that you did. I don't think anyone ever came close to doing that. Do you think that we will have another show like that again?
I think there might be, because I don't think that the public have lost appetite for it. I think the people who make television decisions nowadays, the bosses, they've decided that that's the way it should go. That's not necessarily to say that the public want it that way. I think there'll always be room on television, please God, for conversation, for you know the guy just asking the question and asking another one and getting something from people. I mean, as I said, I mean, I thought that interview that you did with Fagan was fascinating, really fascinating.
Well, that's because I'm a very good host.
Well, no, you're actually a very good interviewer. When you want to be, you're a wonderful interviewer.
I feel slightly embarrassed now.
It's true.
Oh, that's very kind of you. That's very kind of you. That's true. But Michael, you know as well as I do, when you have a great guest, the job is easy.
And you're fascinated by the subject too, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's when I made Alan sound good.
Well,
that's when I was really
that's
so
the problem.
Chopped liver.
Probably, I would have thought the most famous encounter of all that you ever had on the show, the biggest guest and the most famous name, and as I said, the encounter itself that people talk about was one of your encounters with Muhammad Ali. Of course.
The one where he lost his temper.
Did you meet him when he was Cassius Clay, or was it always after he'd adopted the name
No,
Ali?
always after he'd adopted the name. Interviewed him first of all 71, and then I interviewed him 3 more times till 82. And what again we did was chart the decline of Muhammad Ali too, sadly, because he was the most extraordinary human being I ever met. A most remarkable man, and of course the greatest prize fighter, heavyweight prize fighter, probably of all time.
Yeah.
And a man who you could see the changes in him, in his characters, different people, different persuasions took him one way or another. The time that they had the big row was when he was very much involved with the black Muslims. He always was, of course, but that was a particular point, and he lost his temper with me. And it's one thing sitting next to a jockey who loses his temper to you, but when he's the heavyweight champion of the world, and he weighs 16.5 stone, and he's angry. And when I saw him in all his moods, so I knew when he was selling tickets, and he'd pretend to get angry, the eyes would dance and laugh. But when he got crossing me here, I mean, the eyes were hard, coal black.
What about at the time? You must have known it was, even if it wasn't necessarily a comfortable moment, you must have known this was a memorable moment.
Well, what I remember thinking of it, when he lost his temper because I had a book, he was talking about his relations with white people. He said he hated all white men. And I said, that's a nonsense. You work with white men. I said, look, this book here about my Bud Schulberg, a friend of yours, he's not a friend, he's an acquaintance. He said, anyway, this book, he says that you, Muhammad Ali, have got more white friends than any other black athlete he ever knew. And I went like that. And he thought, he's going to say, read it. And I knew he's semi-literate. I knew he couldn't do that. I wouldn't embarrassed him that way. But because of that, he kind of reared up, showed the fangs, and away he went. And I mean, for 15 minutes, the nicest thing he called me was honky. That was the nicest thing he called me. And he lost his temper. What I thought at the time was, while not fearing for my own safety, not much, was that he was showing a side of him to the British public that they'd not seen before. In America, he divided opinion from the very beginning. Yes. Those who hated him, though here, he was universally adored. Yeah, yeah. What he was saying was actually racist. And I thought then, don't do it. I love you too much. Don't do that. You know? It was really sad.
Let's have a look. This is Sir Michael Parkinson back with Muhammad Ali.
I'm not just a boxer. I'm taught by Elijah Muhammad. I'm educated. Even Oxford University, your biggest seat of learning, offered me a professorship in philosophy and poetry to come here to teach. I'm not just an ordinary fighter. I can talk all week on millions of subjects, and you do not have enough wisdom to corner me on television. You do not have enough. You are too small mentally to tackle me on nothing that I represent. I'm serious. You in this little TV show is nothing to Muhammad Ali. If you got some more questions, I ask them, and I bet you I'll eat you up right here on there. It ain't no way you can tackle me.
you kind of patched that up. I mean, did you mention it the next time you met? Did it hang between you, or did you clear the air?
It did. It sort of. I mean, he was much more wary next time I did him. But the last time I interviewed him, which was my favourite interview, was in 81, 82. And there was a very kind of autumnal feel to that interview because we both danced around each other. We fought each other 3 times, and that was it. You know, sit back and relax on this one. And it was sadly, it was the last interview before his before his sad decline into that which has robbed him of his personality now and robbed him of his power and robbed him of his beauty. And, you know, boxing did that to him.
Well, what remarkable experiences you've had there, what remarkable television you've created for us, so thank you. I must admit, a few years ago, I didn't think I'd be saying this, but I'm saying this to you now. Do you not feel that you're denying us something by not doing this? And would you be tempted back? If the BBC said, Michael, we want you to do some specials, we want to do some more interviews, would you be tempted? Would you accept?
Oh, if it asked me to do specials, I'd be very interested in that. Indeed, I'm working on a couple of things to do with growing old in Britain, which the BBC might do next year. But no, I wouldn't do the talk show again. I mean, not as we're doing it now. I've done that, been there, and all that, and I enjoyed it immensely. And I wouldn't want to be in a situation where I actually might not enjoy it as much as I did, and that might well happen. I'm too old to recover from that kind of disappointment, if ever it did.
Well, that's a noble enough reason for not carrying on, but I do hope we see you more on our TVs. Michael, I'd love to have you. Thank you so much for coming on. I have thoroughly enjoyed the book, and I don't always bother reading the books of guests on the show. But in your case, I absolutely made the exception because it was a joy from start to finish. I recommend you get a copy, if not for yourself, then for someone else this Christmas. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Sir Michael Parkinson. Thank you. Thank you. You can leave, unless you want to stay for this year, but I think you probably want to go and see it. Thank you, sir. It was fantastic. Thank you so much. Sir Michael Parkinson. Thanks to all my guests tonight, Sir Michael and, of course, Faye Dunaway and Alan Carr. Thank you all. You were all spectacular guests.